Okay, I'd like to start by mentioning that most things worth having usually don't arrive on time. This birthday present, for example, happens to be a little over 2 months late, but for all intents and purposes, it's perfectly on time. It'll make sense in a bit. My sister's birthday was 2 months ago, and I spent quite a while looking for a present that's actually worth getting her. And the truth is, I'd rather not buy her anything than get her something pointless. Now, I do have a pretty nice philosophy on this type of thing. Gifts tend to have more meaning if there's something that the receiver can't necessarily get themselves. So either something they can't reasonably afford, something that takes too much energy, or something that takes too much time. And given we're both in our 20s, I figure there's nothing I can get her that she can't actually afford, but I can do something that she wouldn't have time or energy to do for herself. So we just need to figure out what that is. Now, a few months back, she bought a Switch and she really seems to be loving it. And I mean, that really hasn't changed ever since. So through that, she kind of sort of grew into this really big Pokemon fan. And she does play other games, but Pokemon always seems to be her go-to. Now, during her playthrough of Pokemon Legends Arceus, I found out that she's actually infatuated with Eevee and basically just wants a team of evolutions, which, doesn't really seem like it's going to change anytime soon either. So factoring this in, Pokemon Scarlet and Violet have just been released, and I was pretty confident that she'd hop into them almost instantly, and would then sort of tunnel vision into just finding an Eevee as soon as possible. And I'm going to preface this by saying that even when she had Let's Go Pikachu, the first thing that she asked was, how do I find Eevee in this? Right, so again, I really think this is a sticking point for her. Right, so with all that in mind, I figured that I'd just try to leverage this somehow. There's definitely something I can do here. Now, for context, I started planning this for about a month, right? So about a month before Scarlet and Violet was actually released, and I effectively had a month to do something, right? I do have a copy of Pokemon Shield, and wouldn't you guess it, they have Eevees in there, so I got a great idea, but this idea sort of requires so much prep that it's actually a little bit ridiculous. And thus begins our journey for the perfect belated birthday present. Also, just an FYI, yes, this is a rather lengthy video, but the details help explain the effort that went into the gift, since the whole premise of the gift is that it took a lot of effort. It wouldn't really be worth much if I just kind of dumped it down to, hey, I got you this. Alright, so step 1. Getting this thing going is going to need a lot of things, but many of which are kind of endgame items. So I never actually properly played the game, so we had to set up a new save file, hopped on in and played through the entire game from start to finish. Now, flash forward as we defeat all the different gym leaders and become the champion, and we can actually get started, but we're going to need to get a few items to get this thing rolling. Okay, so I actually have no idea where she's going to be able to find an Eevee in Scarlet and Violet. Never played the game, and realistically I started this before I could figure that out. So getting her an Eevee to start her game with sounds pretty good, but I don't think any old Eevee is just going to cut it. So with that, we're going to need to do some breeding. A lot of breeding actually, and so for that, I'm going to need an oval charm. Fortunately, there's this gentleman in the hotel that would happily give me one after I take on his surprisingly aggravating team. And with that done, the charm should allow more eggs to appear in the daycare center when I leave my 2 Pokemon there, effectively speeding up the process a little. Next, I'll need the Destiny Knot, which you can buy for 10 BP. Where do you get BP, you ask? With the Battle Tower, of course, an endgame fighting ring. So yeah, a few fights in and we buy it, no issues there. The last thing you need is an Everstone, but they're sort of everywhere and I just kind of had some on me from a regular playthrough, so whatever. The Destiny Knot allows you to pass on 5 IVs from across the 2 parents that the egg was laid from. And IVs are just individual values, or basically you can think of them as a Pokemon's genetics, and if you play enough at the Battle Tower, you can kind of get the option to see them in your box. So you'll need this to try to breed a really strong Eevee, and I mean a really strong Eevee, like I want this thing to be a tank. The Everstone lets you pass down the Pokemon's nature, which is basically its personality. Some natures allow certain stats to grow faster at the expense of another stat, and in our case this Eevee can evolve into so many different types of evolutions, all of which could benefit from different stat combinations. So with that, I figured that I'd breed for a balanced nature just to keep things safe. She can do whatever she wants with this little curmudgeon, so without kind of forcing a nature onto her, it kind of gives her that freedom and flexibility to decide exactly how she wants to use this Eevee, without me kind of pushing her in any specific direction. So with that, I figured that we'll just stick with what we have here, but we do find out a little bit later as well that the IVs do kind of force her down that path anyway, well, I'm just saying. Alright, so with the items that I needed out of the way, now I need to get some Pokemon. A strong Eevee doesn't really matter much outside of a competitive play, and my sister isn't really into that sort of thing, so we kind of need something more visually distinct. So we're going to need to go the shiny route. right? Getting a shiny naturally is a 1 in 4096 chance, so that's sort of bad. We can kind of raise those chances by using something called the Masuda method, which should drop it to 1 in 683, and I do know that you could go even lower if you had a shiny charm, which I didn't. And honestly, trying to fill the entire Pokedex with kind of a deadline of November 18th sounded like a bad idea, so yeah. Right. First, we'll need a foreign Ditto. Any Ditto caught in the game which used a different language than the system language is classified as a foreign Ditto. And since I used English, literally anything else is fine. I considered making a separate file in Italian and then using Pokemon Home to trade to myself, but I kind of need a strong Ditto. Like really good genetics, and this isn't going to happen unless I finish the entire game again in Italian. So yeah, we're going to need to trade with some foreigners. So we'll just go ahead and toss the Ditto into Pokemon Home, drop it into the GTS, and we wait. 5 minutes later, we get a Japanese Ditto. FYI, the one that I got here in the video actually had horrible genetics, so I did this a few more times until I got a really good one. Now that we have our Ditto, we need to get a Pokemon with the ability Flame Body or Steam Engine to help hatch eggs faster. And a little while later, we kind of got this stud right here to help us out. So with this, we can finally get started. First, we give our big boy a smoke ball to help him run away from Pokemon better. He's a really heavy guy. He's not going to run away really fast, and his levels are actually pretty comparable to the rest of the Pokemon here. So giving him a smoke ball just means that if you ever accidentally hit someone, just get out of there, right? Never really hurts to have the opportunity to bail out from accidental encounters. Next, we're going to give the Destiny Knot to our Japanese Ditto to pass some of those IVs down, and then the Everstone will be given to my Sylveon, Viola, mostly since it already has the correct nature. So, next, all we need to do is toss them into the daycare, walk around for a little bit, and poof, they produced an egg. Woo! Now obviously doing this one at a time would take forever, so instead we do them in sets of 5. Now since Viola doesn't have particularly good IVs, this will probably not yield anything special, but once we breed enough, at least one of them should have better IVs. And once we find it, we can just take it out of the box, swap places with Viola as the new parent, and then just try to ensure that we don't forget to transfer the Everstone as well. Eventually the stats will just get better and better until we hit that competitively viable shiny. So, this process took a really long time, really long. After hatching 1078 adorable fluffy things, it finally happened. Now looking at those stats, we got 5 perfect IVs, all in great stats except special attack, which could be worse. This does mean some evolutions would be less viable than others, but this build does make sense for a good Flareon, Umbreon, or, pretty much any of the others to be entirely honest. It's just more of a physical than special attacker. It also has the ability to be extremely tanky, so it stands out as a little monster. Some of the evolutions do focus a lot more on special attack, and I think, Jolteon's all about speed, which this one has, but Jolteon also really focuses on special attacks. So this may not be the best one for it, but again, if you're going to go the route of maybe an Umbreon or, Flareon, which are a little bit more on, either tanking or kind of physical attack, this is a really good Pokemon for it. And the fact that it's not on both of the attacks is pretty good, so having at least one of the types of attack as not being the viable one is a lot better than having one of the defenses or having speed. So, all in all, I think this worked out really well. I should also note that further along the way I did breed 12 perfect Eevees as well, so there is something to show for it. All that's left now is to wait until she buys Pokemon Violet, and then I can send her new team member to take along on the entire journey. This present didn't cost me a single cent, but the sheer amount of time and effort that went into it, and just kind of getting it on time, made me really proud of it. I actually couldn't believe my eyes when the shiny appeared. You get so desensitized to the process that it really hits you out of nowhere. So, again, happy birthday, Sous, I really hope you like it. And as a final note, I also came across this little development and figured, given your culinary background, you'd find it cute. So if you want one, hit me up and I'll send it to you with your Eevee, assuming you can actually transfer this thing to Pokemon Scarlet and Violet. Till next time.